We're going to talk about the filter blur gallery, and I have my push pin image here, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this layer, and we'll do our blurs on kind of these above layers here. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this, make sure it's highlighted, and I'm going to go filter, and I'll go down to blur gallery. I'll start with field blur. So let's start off by looking at some of our options, and it's updating my preview here, as we can kind of see. And what I'm noticing here is I got my field blur. The blur is set to 15 pixels. And I'll start off with effects here. So this kind of has everything kind of normal. And then we've got this pin in the center. Now you can move the pin to different places by clicking and moving it around as so. So I'm going to put the pin kind of right here on this green and push pin in kind of off center just so you can kind of see it. So we're going to go ahead and just leave the preview set. This next button here is undo or remove all pins. There's a cancel and there's an OK. Now, you can adjust the strength here by turning the circle and you can get it more blurry. Or you can take this down to, let's say, 0. Now, if you had a hard time doing that, you could just type in 0 in the box, and now it's set at 0. So that's kind of the normal way this works. Now, if you wanted to do kind of a gradient with field blur, we could add like another pin. So let's say I wanted to have something kind of come over here, and I've got a new one. And on my new one, let's say I want to add that to about 15. So right now what happened here is that that pin, actually I did it to 17, but that pin is showing blur and it's kind of radiating out, and then this one is not having blur. You can see in one image here I can differentiate the amount of blur, and so it's blurrier in different parts. So I could make a third pin down here, and again I'll let it update itself and we can play around with some more blur. So field blur can be used to do one blur over one area, or you can do it to vary it up so that you have sort of like depth of field, but maybe it's not natural depth of field. Now, with the effects here, the bokeh, if I go to the right here, you'll see highlights starting to come through a little bit more, especially kind of looking areas where there was kind of reflective highlight. And we're going to see those pop up. Now, if I do color, you're going to see that pop up as well. And it would be more saturated. Now, the white push pins probably aren't going to get much more saturated. But let's try to make this go a little bit more extreme. You can kind of see how it's letting that highlight come through more. And then the other thing I can do is make it so it's not quite the very tip top part of the highlight, but I can have it kind of affect this area right here so that there's sort of a change over. The last little feature I like with field blur here is if I click on noise, you can add kind of a grain effect by adding some sort of graininess to the actual blur areas, so it looks a little more natural in a sense here. So you can play around size and roughness and amount and get it to kind of maybe have the same sort of overall look as the non-blur areas, and that makes it look more normal. So that gives you an idea of what field blur is capable of. And if we click OK, you'll see that if I'll turn off this top layer, that was the before, and here's the after with field blur.